The New Orleans Saints showed a ton of promise in their season opener, beating the brakes off the Carolina Panthers, but now they go up a weight class, facing the Dallas Cowboys on the road. What do they have to do to get the win? We're going to talk about that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosevoglu, and as always, we're brought to you by Scott Vicknair Injury Lawyers. Who've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore. Scott Vicknair handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. If you guys like the content we've been rolling out at Brew Crew Media, make sure to subscribe to the channel and also give this video a like. It definitely helps us out. We're doing more shorts, film reviews, post-game live streams, halftime live streams, trying to give it to you all during this NFL season. And hopefully the Saints kind of return the favor with good play, which they certainly did in week one. But now you go up, because when you face the Panthers and you win 47-10, it's a really impressive win. And I think anyone that tries to dismiss it is being unfair to the Saints, the new coaching staff with having Clint Kubiak in there as the OC, and the players that stepped up, whether it was Derek Carr, whether it was Alvin, the defense. I think it is unfair to dismiss it and rule it as, well, you face the Panthers. And don't get me wrong, I think the Panthers are going to be the worst team in the NFL this season, but I think it kind of undermines the good things that the Saints did. That being said, the best way to go out and get your respect, to make everyone realize that it's not just a fluke win and it's not just about the Panthers being bad, is going into Dallas and beating the Cowboys. And it's much easier said than done. Dallas has been a really good home team for a while now under Mike McCarthy and when Dak's healthy. And defensively, they got some playmakers. Is it the most well-rounded defense in the league? No, but they do have Mike Zimmer running the show there now on defense, and they looked really, really impressive in week one against the Cleveland Browns. So that brings us to our first topic of this preview show for Saints versus Cowboys. And we're going to focus on the quarterback, Derek Carr, who was lights out in week one. 3 touchdown passes, only 4 incompletions. He was in command. He took shots down the field. He showed some toughness. Just arguably his best performance as a member of the Saints. It was a really, really nice showing for Derek Carr. And you hope that it's a confidence boost. And you can look at it 2 ways. You can look at it and say, man, this is just the start of the season, easy opponent. Or if you want to be really optimistic, we could talk about his last 5 games. Dating back to last year, if you take the last 5 games for Derek Carr, he's 4-1 record-wise in those spans. But I'm not one of those people that thinks win-loss is a QB stat, because if you do that, then guys like Jimmy Garoppolo end up being considered a good quarterback, and we know that's not true. But let's talk statistics. In that span, he's completed at least 75% of his passes in 4 out of those 5 games. And some of those games, it's in the 80s. He's been really efficient. Touchdown interception-wise, it's been outstanding. 15 touchdowns in those 5 games. Only 1 interception. That's what the Saints got to do, especially against Dallas, a team that has become really, really good at forcing turnovers. You got to play a clean football game. So that's going to be big for Derek Carr, obviously. Now, on the flip side of things, Dallas does, in terms of talent-wise, they're a little shorthanded at the moment coming into this season. They knew Deron Bland was going to miss some time, a little bit over a month, maybe 2 months worth of time. And that's good for the Saints in terms of not worrying about too many ball hawks, because we're talking about a guy that last season led the league in interceptions, and it felt like he was returning almost every single one for a touchdown. That's how good he was for Dallas. Now, Carr, like I said, week one, he was outstanding. The Cowboys secondary week one, without Deron Bland, they were outstanding. And the funny thing is, you can look at it both ways. You can look at it from Derek Carr and say, well, it was against the Panthers. And you can look at it from the Cowboys perspective and say, well, it was against the Browns and Deshaun Watson, who's just been incredibly bad over the last couple of seasons. So you can have it either way. But we're going to get some clarity one way or another for both sides. Derek Carr, if he has another big performance here, I think a lot of those fans in New Orleans who are still kind of holding some doubts, I think those start to get erased a little bit. And boy, would I love that for Derek Carr. And boy, would I love for the Saints offense if he goes out there and he has a really impressive showing against, in my opinion, a better defense than what he went up against in Carolina. So it's going to be a tall task. And there are going to be things that could limit the Saints. We'll talk about the injury report in just a little bit and how that could really affect this team. But I think in terms of just looking at this game script, if we're just looking at what needs to be done for the Saints, you need Derek Carr to play an efficient game. You need him to play a turnover-free game. And, of course, you're going to need him to take some shots along the way. He did that last week. If the opportunity presents himself, especially with Rashid Shaheed in one of those one-on-one situations, or even Chris Olave in a one-on-one situation, Got to take the shot, got to be able to take chances against good teams and hope that you end up executing those opportunities. So Derek Carr, pressure's on, but the pressure's also privilege for him because if he goes into Dallas and he knocks off the Cowboys in week 2, you start to feel very confident going into week 3, and the perception surrounding the Saints is going to change a little bit because right now you're thinking, what are the Saints? Are they a team that just beat up a crappy Panthers team, or are they going to be the surprise of the NFC? And the temperature in the room is going to change if they go into Dallas and they knock off Dallas and Derek Carr looks efficient and the run game with Clint Kubiak running the show looks very dynamic. Trust me, the temperature in the room will change if they upset the Cowboys, but it all starts with your quarterback leading by example and putting out a good game. So we'll see if he could do that. Another key for the Saints, and arguably the biggest one, is slowing down Micah Parsons. Man, there's 2 things Micah Parsons knows how to do really well. One of them is record podcasts and talk about the rest of the NFC East. He's fantastic at that. And the second thing is rushing the quarterback. And unfortunately for the Saints, that's the challenge they have going up. And last week, man, it was tough to watch that Cleveland game because you could just tell Parsons had his fingerprints all over that game script for Dallas. Just incredible. Him and DeMarcus Lawrence. And that's what makes it so frustrating is, as a Saints fan, you might say, okay, double Micah Parsons, chip him, do everything to make sure he doesn't affect the game. And that might sound great to you until you realize the minute you do that, you also got to worry about DeMarcus Lawrence on the other side. And if you worry about one too much, the other might make you pay. So this is a duo that combined for 18 pressures and 3 sacks in week 1. And to make matters worse for the Saints, Fuaga right now, his status is up in the air. Limited practice on Wednesday with the back, and then did not practice today because of a back injury. Now, he's dealt with back tightness earlier this year, and when he was out, Dennis Allen said if there was a game, I believe he'd be able to play. Hopefully, that holds true for this weekend because I'm not saying the Saints can't win without Fuaga. I think to say that so early in the season when we got 1 game of seeing him in live action is a little ridiculous. But the challenges are just really tough because then all of a sudden you're looking at Landon Young and Trevor Penning as your tackles against a really, really good pass rushing duo. And no matter how good the game script is, it's tough to figure out how to navigate in passing downs if that's what you're rolling with. So stopping Micah Parsons, even if Fuaga's healthy, is going to be a problem. And that goes for stopping DeMarcus Lawrence as well. But if he is out, all of a sudden that gets dialed up a notch and you start wondering, man, what is the formula to figuring this out? So I'm very curious to see how the Saints handle this. But like I said, 18 pressures from that pass rushing duo for Dallas in week 1. Deshaun Watson looked like he was running for his life, and it was ugly to watch. That was bad football to watch. And for the Saints, that's the last thing you want to happen to you. So how do you avoid that? Even if you don't have Fuaga, you got to run right at Micah Parsons. You got to. And if Dallas's defensive line is going to shut down the Saints' run game, so be it. But you got to set the tone immediately, and you got to make sure that you are putting yourself in more manageable situations for the rest of the game. And if you look at the teams that have had success against Dallas in big moments, I think Green Bay last year in the playoffs, I think the 49ers twice in the playoffs, they are teams that run the football really well and make sure you are not able to just pin your ears back and go after the quarterback. Green Bay did that a lot last season in the playoffs. I mean, Aaron Jones ran all over Dallas. I think back with the 49ers, they ran, you know that they're going to run the football. So Dallas had to do 2 things. Either you're going to get run at or you're going to sell it to stop the run, and then they got beat by the 49ers pass catchers that they had out there. I remember Kittle had a really nice game at one point in the playoffs for them. So for the Cowboys, that's been their Achilles heel. Now, it's not the same scheme. It's not Dan Quinn running everything anymore. It's a little different. So that part, for me, okay, maybe there's an asterisk there on that. But I do think that is what you have to do with great pass rushers, regardless of the scheme. You got to run at them. You got to try and wear them down because that's your best bet. You have a better shot of wearing down Micah Parsons by having Alvin Kamara, having Jamal Williams, having Taysom Hill running through his chest, or at least attempting to run through his chest on 2-3 downs in a row than you do of just chipping in with Foster Moreau and chipping in with Juwan Johnson and then hoping he doesn't beat Trevor Penning or doesn't beat Fuaga. Or in this case, if Fuaga misses the game, doesn't beat Landon Young. I just think that part is a little, you're kind of living in La La Land if you think that's what's going to happen. So for the Saints, run the damn ball and run it right at Micah Parsons, and maybe you wear him down that way. And if you do that, all of a sudden the game opens up. The game absolutely opens up for the Saints. So that's another huge factor in this. As much as I love to talk about Derek Carr, and what he has to do for the Saints to win this game against Dallas, a lot of it is predicated on this run attack and this offensive line being able to wear down Micah. Because if you can't, and Micah's dominating the game from start to finish, you're going to lose. It's as simple as that. So for the Saints, slowing down Micah Parsons is paramount. Everyone would agree with it, and there's no question about it. So I'm going to get into other keys for this game as well as my prediction in just a little bit. Before I do that, I want to get a word from one of the sponsors of our show, Scott Vicknair Injury Lawyers.
And Jonathan Williams brings it all the way back from the 20-yard line.
What a terrific way to end the first half.
And tonight's game is brought to you by Scott Vicknair Injury Attorneys. They always fight for the win.
You mean attorney? It's one lawyer. Scott Vicknair?
No, there's two.
Brad Scott and David Vicknair.
Well, it's confusing.
That it is. They could have picked a better name.
Scott Vicknair Injury Attorneys. We fight for the win.
Once again, thank you to Scott Vicknair for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. So let's get into another key. And man, this one is one of those where this might be a topic that we're talking about for multiple weeks. I don't know if it's just this week. So Marshon Lattimore, his status for week 2 is in question right now. He left week 1 with an injury, and he said he'll be fine. And at the moment, you feel like, okay, all right, you got to take his word. But then he's been out of practice the last couple of days. And at this point, I think we start to wonder if he's just going to be out for this week, which I think is going to be the case. I do believe this is going to be the case. I'd be shocked if Marshon Lattimore plays in week 2, and that will present a challenge for the Saints. And that also brings us to our tweet of the week, which is presented by Standard Mortgage, your local lender for life. To get in touch with a home loan expert today, you give them a call at 504-569-3902. I said no Marshon Lattimore this Sunday will be tough, especially since I think the matchup versus CeeDee Lamb is arguably the most important. I don't think there's any way to argue against that for the Saints defense. I think for the offense, we talked about it. You got to find a way to wear down Micah Parsons. For the Saints defense, it all starts and ends with CeeDee Lamb, because right now, you might catch a break. Jake Ferguson might not play. He had a knee injury in week 1. I don't know if Dallas rushes him for week 2. Running back room for Dallas is not that explosive. Rico Dowdle, decent back. And obviously, when it comes to Zeke, he had a nice week 1 game, but he is not an explosive back anymore. Those days are long gone. And Brandon Cooks, again, has some moments. Veteran player, though. So CeeDee Lamb, if Marshon Lattimore was in the picture and he erases CeeDee Lamb, I honestly feel like that would be a Saints win. That's how confident I'd be. And that's the type of impact Marshon could have when he's on his game. We've seen it before so many times. We've seen it against Dallas on a Sunday night game, although it was Amari Cooper that time around. So Marshon has the ability to really, really make life a living hell for opposing wide receiver ones. We talk about it all the time. Unfortunately, Marshon's also been injury prone for the last 3 seasons. And this isn't for me to say, get rid of Marshon or any of that. That's not the discussion that I want to have. And that's not where I'm going with this. This is not about trading Marshon. This is not about saying that he's washed, because he's not any of those things. He's not washed, and you're not trading the guy, at least not right now. What I will start to wonder, though, is when we talk about the Saints, is it better for us as fans to kind of not assume that he's going to play? Because he has missed a lot of time. And luckily for the Saints, they are talented at cornerback and have enough depth that if he does miss time, they will find ways to kind of get around that problem. If anything, it's just a little bit more frustrating, because I think Marshon can be the difference between the Saints being a top 7 defense, let's say, and a top 2, top 3 defense. That is the gap that we're talking about, because he's such a special player. And if you had him as your cornerback 1, what other team has the luxury of saying, hey, Paulson Adebo, who might get a ridiculous contract this offseason because he's been balling out the last couple of years, is your cornerback 2? And by the way, your nickel corner is going to be Alontae Taylor, who had 3 sacks last week, had a couple of nice pass breakups, has been really locked in. And your 4th corner, who you don't expect to see the field unless someone gets hurt, is Kool-Aid McKinstry, who was an arguably day 1 prospect who you got in day 2 and were able to trade up. So the Saints have depth at corner. And Marshon's injury will present opportunity. It presents opportunity for Adebo. If he goes out there and shuts down CeeDee Lamb, who just got $34 million a year, what does that say about Paulson Adebo's worth? Probably helps him out a good bit. And what if Kool-Aid McKinstry sees the field and he plays well against Dallas's secondary wide receivers? What does that say for the rookie, for his confidence? What the Saints think about him moving forward? And Alontae Taylor, I think the same opportunity is going to present himself. I think you keep him in the slot, you let him wreak havoc because he is locked in right now, and he might make the difference for the Saints. There might be a moment you decide to rush him off the edge free and he makes a big play on Dak. Who knows? So I would keep Alante as is. You know Adebo is going to be on the outside, but it is a little frustrating about Lattimore's injury, at least for it to happen this early for a matchup that this was one of the ones I circled for Lattimore, because for Dallas, so much of what they base their offense on is Dak and CD kind of playing that two-man game, that pitch and catch that's going to work 90% of the time against NFL defenses. And when it doesn't, go look at the numbers for the most part. Dallas struggles. There is a direct correlation between the playoff losses that Dallas has and the numbers that CD puts up, or the lack of numbers in the postseason games. When CD's not thriving, Dallas isn't thriving. It's kind of that simple. And for Lattimore to be banged up right now and potentially miss this game is pretty frustrating. Obviously, you can't get mad at the player. Injuries are part of the game, and I hope Marshon bounces back and, he's ready for week 3, because that's another game against A.J. Brown where you circle that one. You think, okay, he can be the difference. So you just want Marshon healthy, and at this point in the season, you're not rushing anything. But, man, this would have been the matchup if Marshon took out CD, and I'm not talking about literally, I'm just saying, like, statistically, that all of a sudden the odds kind of favor the Saints a little bit more than what they would right now. Because obviously, if you look at the odds and you could check on DraftKings Sportsbook, they're a 6-point dog right now. So I'm more so just conflicted, because I'm upset that Lattimore's going to miss time. On the other hand, I think Adebo's got a great opportunity here. It's feast or famine for him. You're either going to be able to show you can hang with guys like CD, or you don't, and then you kind of figure out what your market is. So we'll see what happens in that regard, guys. But I'm really excited to see how the Saints combat that Dallas offense, because it is a productive offense, but I don't think it's a talented offense. And that's why I kind of laugh when CD gets his money and Dak gets his money and everyone complains about it. I'm like, do you see what's around them? The pieces are not there. I would say Ferguson is their third best offensive player, and he's probably going to miss this game for Dallas. So we'll see what happens for the Saints. But Marshon's injury, no doubt about it, and definitely affects the Saints. And it's just a question now of how long will he be out, assuming he misses week 2, which he's on track to miss week 2 at the moment. So before I get into any comments that you guys put in the chat, and that will be a reminder to you guys, if you're watching right now and you want to put out any questions, any predictions, hot takes, put them in the chat and I'll pull them up before we wrap up the show, and we'll get to get your voice on the show and see what you guys have to say about week 2, the Saints, everything going on. And by the way, I hope everyone is doing safe in New Orleans. I know the hurricane made landfall, I believe, last night. So I hope everyone's doing well and everyone was unaffected. But I'm going to just give my overall thoughts going into this week 2 game. I'll keep it short, and then I'll turn the page over to you guys and your comments in the chat. I think this game for the Saints, I'm not going to play the moral victory card. I know there's a lot of, if the Saints hanging with Dallas, that's a win in my book. I'm not going to play it that way. My thoughts on the Saints will change, though, if they go into Dallas and they're toe-to-toe with Dallas from start to finish. I will start to look at them a little bit differently. I expected them to win week 1, did not expect them to beat the crap out of the Panthers. And unlike people who want to put that down and say, well, it was just against Carolina, I look at it from the other sense and I go, okay, the blueprint is there for you to have a really effective offense. And we knew the defense under Dennis Allen was going to be good. So that doesn't surprise us. So the blueprint's there. Can you now have success with that same blueprint against better opponents? That's the way I'm looking at it. And I'm really fascinated to see how the Saints respond against better competition. So I'm not going to play the moral victory card. I am excited for this matchup. And I do think the Saints, if they can run the football well, they'll have a shot. And I think that's the main key right now. I would have said Lattimore versus CeeDee Lamb would have been the biggest matchup, because if he takes out CD, it changes the ball game. But you got to assume right now that Lattimore is going to be out. So can you run at Micah Parsons to slow him down a little bit? Can Derek play efficient football? And can Alvin in that run game keep Dallas's defense honest? If you can do that, the Saints will have a legitimate shot. Now, for score prediction on my end right now, I think the Saints will probably lose 27-23. That's where I'm at right now. That's where I'm at. But on the other hand, the Saints defense, particularly their defensive line, they have an opportunity here to really make some noise. I thought that in week 1, they would have done more damage against Bryce Young than they ended up doing. The defense as a whole did damage. Make no mistake about it. Bryce Young looked like a lost puppy. But I thought the defensive line would wreck the entire game plan for Carolina. I'm not expecting them to completely wreck the game plan for Dallas. But what if they do? What if Chase Young has one of those kind of transcendent performances that we all know he is capable of having because of his talent? That might put more pressure on Dallas. That might make it a more defensive game, make it a little bit uglier of a game, and that could favor New Orleans. I think a ground and pound, physical style game would favor New Orleans. And maybe this ends up being a 23-20 game. Now, I'm going to take Dallas in this one, but I do think the Saints are going to keep it close. And I think how the Saints figure it out in Dallas and how they operate against a hostile crowd, against a team that won 12 games last year, it's going to tell us a lot about this team. Because last year, the Saints, we know were not winning against 500 teams, but what bothered me the most is they were going down 10, 14, 17 points at halftime. And then they would come back towards the end to only lose. But it felt like they were only making their push once the opposing team was kind of taking their foot off the gas. And I would like to see New Orleans this season, against better competition, from start to finish, be in the fight. Don't be out of the fight for 5 rounds, and then all of a sudden you start throwing some shots and make it a little interesting, but we all know you lost the fight on points anyway. So be in the fight, and I do think the Saints could pull off the upset. I don't see this as a no-brainer Dallas pick. I am picking Dallas because I think if Fuaga misses this game, I think it makes life a little bit tougher for the Saints offense. You know, they're already dealing with some new faces. Do you want to add another into the mix? So I'll go Dallas. But I think it's going to be close, and I think the Saints are good enough to win this game. I really do. I'm not trying to blow smoke up anyone's ass. I think this team showed me something in week 1, and they didn't look like the Saints team of last year. So I'm excited and hopeful that they continue to show that. And if they do, then all of a sudden this season looks a little different. Fuck it. It looks a lot different. So we'll see what happens. I think Dallas wins, but I think by like a field goal, a very close game, and I'm excited to see how it all goes down. So I'm going to switch it over to you guys and see what you guys have to say and go from there. Margaret said, it's time to trade Lattimore. He is always hurt. He was good in the beginning, though. He's always great. And I think that's what makes it frustrating. When Lattimore's on the field, he's great. He's not on the field right now, and that part's frustrating. I don't think New Orleans should trade him right now. I don't think the value is good enough. So I think that you got to just ride it out. And again, this injury might be a 1-week thing, guys. He might be back by next week against Philly, and all of a sudden, I look foolish for asking if he's reliable or not. But it is a frustrating situation, no doubt about it. Ernie says Adebo is true cornerback 1, maybe. Well, he's going to have an opportunity. If he goes out there, guys, and he plays well against CeeDee Lamb, you're gonna look at him differently. We're going to think about this team a little differently. And Adebo's agent is going to be dancing on tables. Just Call Me Trey says the run game is critical for us to have a chance. Slow down the pass rush, get the O-line confident, and allow Carr to be comfortable. Defense, I believe, will hold their own for the most part. Yeah, I mean, I agree, Trey. I think that for the Saints, obviously the run game is paramount. To move the chains, it's paramount. To slow down that defensive pass rush for the Cowboys, and obviously their duo of Parsons and Lawrence, how good they've been. And again, just look at the history. Teams like the Rams, teams like the Packers, teams like the Niners, teams like the Lions that want to run the football, those seem to be the teams that go into Dallas and do pretty well, as opposed to others who go in there and kind of get smacked around. So I agree with you. It's going to be on the run game and how they can set the tone, if they can set the tone. Jerry G says, we beat Dallas. I don't care what they say. 1, love the confidence, Jerry. 2, I definitely think it's a possibility. If you asked me a couple months ago, I would make the schedule and I go win Panthers, loss Cowboys, and it'd be no hesitation. Now I'm saying win against the Panthers, check. 3-point loss to the Cowboys, but I think you can hang in this and win the fight. So my stance has changed. Even if they lose Sunday, bearing a blowout, if the Saints go into Dallas and they lose by 20, 24 points, all of a sudden I'm going to be a little confused. I'm not going to have any hot takes, but I'm going to be confused. But I think they're going to be in this game. And I think Vegas is telling you they think they're going to be in this game. Because I promise you, 2 weeks ago, Vegas was probably looking at this spread, 7.5, 8.5, 2-possession game, and they would dare you to take the Saints. And now they kind of put you in no man's land with that 6-point, 6.5 spread. I think they kind of put you in a tough spot. They were impressed with what the Saints did. And Vegas, as we all know, is very rarely wrong. Probably never wrong. Just Call Me Trey says, got my Drew Brees jersey dry cleaned. I'll be out at the Cowboys Stadium cutting up. I love that, man. I love that. Rose City says, you're not shutting down Lamb or Parsons. Just got to limit them. I agree You don't really shut down great players, right? But I do think that there's a way to make them pretty quiet. And I'm not saying shut down completely, but pretty quiet, because we've seen it with Micah before. He is not that disruptive in those playoff games. He's not. Well, we've seen it with CeeDee Lamb before. He's not as disruptive as possible. Because I think the world of CeeDee Lamb. Top 5 receiver, great player. I think there are moments that you can get to him. This is the matchup, though, with Lattimore probably out. We'll see what happens, because I think Adebo is good enough to hold his own, but Adebo's got to prove it, And what better way than in this game? And I remember last year against the Rams, not his best outing. Puka Nacua had a really good game. Can he redeem himself? Again, you're not going to shut down CeeDee Lamb. I think you have a better chance of wearing down Micah than shutting down CeeDee Lamb. But Adebo goes out there and he plays well. We'll see. Jerry says everyone's picking Dallas because they're the favorite to win. Yeah, and look, I think for Dallas, they looked really good week 1. Very impressive win against Cleveland, which was a playoff team. Home opener. The vibes are good in Dallas at the moment. But I'm not surprised. Nor do I honestly feel disrespected as a Saints fan that no one's picking the Saints. I don't feel that way. If people were predicting blowouts, I'd say, all right, that's a little unfair. But a lot of people, for the most part, are predicting close games. Some people even saying Dallas is on upset alert. I saw that was a big topic on ESPN this Thursday. So, I'm not surprised they're picking them, but I'm not disrespected by it. A home opener, I'd expect them to pick Dallas. Rose City says pass rush got to get home and get Dak off his mark and keep running at Dallas on offense. I agree wholeheartedly on both parts. Got to get pressure on Dak. I've said before, as productive as Dak has been, I really think that he is not as mobile as he was in past, and that is totally okay and normal because the man had a really bad ankle injury. But I think you might be able to get some rushers at him. And if so, throw him off his spot. You might be able to. Riva says, I think this will be another rock fight in the mud. 13-10, you pick the winner. Hey, look, if this is a 13-10 game, I actually think it favors New Orleans. I really do. If it's a muddied up game, I think that favors New Orleans. Even if it's not as low scoring as that, if it's 23-20, that might favor New Orleans. So we'll see. But I think this team, that is what they're built for. If we look at the teams that they struggled against last year, like I think the Lions game, right? Lions came out hot out the gate. And the Saints are already down 20-plus points. You're like, okay, game feels over because the Lions had the firepower. Now, Saints made a little bit of a comeback, end up falling short. But if you can make it a little bit of an uglier game, that would favor them. Chase Young had two near sacks but couldn't finish. Look, Chase Young was disruptive game 1. No doubt about it. I went back and rewatched the game, forced a couple bad throws from Bryce Young. Chase Young's mark was on the game. Statistically, you don't see it, but from the eyes, you absolutely see it. So I agree with you. Let's see if he can finish off the plays, this weekend, because that would be big for the Saints. This is a how tough is this team type of game. Totally agree. The Saints last year, losing in Dallas. The Saints 2 years ago, losing in Dallas. And I think it would be the way that I just spoke about before. Get blown out early, make a little bit of a comeback when Dallas lets their foot off the gas, but they still lose. Here's the moment. Here's the moment to show that you are not those teams. And that will matter. Lone Wolf Elijah says, how much do the Saints have to do offensively to score fast and get on the board quickly and out of range in Dallas? Ooh, out of range, they're going to have to do a lot. They would have to do what they did against Carolina, and I don't expect them to do that. And what they did against Carolina was fantastic. They're firing on all cylinders. You don't expect another performance that consistent and that good. But I do think that for this team, get an early opening. Opening drive touchdown's a lot to ask, but can the Saints score early? Can they go into halftime and have at least 10 to 13 points on the board? I'm thinking more 13. They'll be in a good spot. Because Dallas scores points at home. And now maybe Ferguson changes a little bit of that because Ferguson is a very good tight end. But Dallas can score at home. So got to get at least 13 on the board by halftime, I think, minimum. And if you do that, you're going to be in pretty good shape. Anything more than that, you're cooking with gas. Who dat? Saints fans forget Kool-Aid was a first round pick. This is the second game. 2 interceptions for Kool-Aid. Hey, if Kool-Aid has 2 interceptions, they are going to be in great shape. I'll put it that way. In great shape. William says if we can protect Carr and give him a clean pocket, we win. It's all about O-line play. For the most part, it is. Got to protect Carr. O-line play, though, is the name of the game, right? I think more so for how they run the football, because there were a lot of great running lanes for Alvin to run through, Taysom to run through, Jamal Williams to run through. So if they could do that again against Dallas, that's going to hold it over. And that's going to take pressure off of Derek Carr. Forget about the pass protection, too. If you can run the football well, less pressure on Derek, the play action game opens up. Maybe some pre-snap motion to throw off Dallas's defense. Saints could be in a really good spot. K-Man says Dallas is overrated, in quotes, in parentheses, again. I do agree with that. I do think Dallas is overrated. I think we also believe that their roster is better than it is. I don't think their roster is that good. Good quarterback, good receiver, good DBs, decent O-line, good pass rushers. But there are weaknesses. I do think that Dallas's linebackers can be beat. I do think in the middle of the defense, they can be beat. I think their receivers outside of CeeDee Lamb are not that good. Run game, not that great. So there are weaknesses. I agree. This is an overrated team in terms of how people view them, because Dallas is Super Bowl or bust because of expectations. But in reality, if I were to look at that roster, I would never say it's Super Bowl or bust, because I think in terms of the NFC alone, San Francisco definitely has a better roster. Detroit has a better roster. Philly's got bigger names. I don't know if that makes them a better roster. They got bigger names, but I don't know if that makes them better. But yeah, we'll see what happens in Dallas. Either way, even if you think they're overrated or not, this is a good test for the Saints. Ted says Dallas is on a 16-game season opener win streak, one short of their franchise record. Season opener or home opener? I'm curious about that. I didn't see that number, but either way, well, I mean, if it's home opener, records are meant to be broken, and hopefully, records are meant to, at the same time, stand. And for the Saints, hopefully that stands. Rose City says, Chris, who would be your X factor on offense and on defense? X factor on offense, I would say, I keep thinking O-line. So I think that's paramount. But you know what? Take out the O-line. I'm going to go Rashid Shaheed, because you go back and you watch that Carolina game. So he scores the opening touchdown, and you can just tell Carolina was locked in on him the rest of the game. And I did a little video on, I don't know if you guys missed it, but we have it on our YouTube page for Bucra Media. So if you guys want, go to our shorts and you can find it. The Juwan Johnson touchdown, the Panthers were so scared about Rashid Shaheed kind of flaring out on a bubble screen, which was really just a design to try and draw the defense in and see if Juwan leaks out. And they all gravitated towards him. Juwan gets out there. He scores a touchdown. So I think that for the offense, maybe Rashid, because Rashid has that game-breaking playmaking ability, Olave is the better receiver, no question. But Shaheed can give you those like cheap touchdowns, those quick one-play hitters. So I'll go Shaheed on offense. On defense, I said before, Lattimore obviously would have been the guy, and now he's probably out. So I'm going to shift this over, and I'm going to say for the Saints, I'm going to go Chase Young. Can you go out there and can you put pressure on Dak Prescott and make this a little bit rough for him? And if you do that, things start to shift. Again, the way I view this game is it's 55-45 Dallas in their favor. But that meter can shift in your favor if you start winning certain matchups. And I think Chase is good enough to make plays to shift this in the Saints' favor. He's got to go out there and execute. Bijan says, Cowboys will have to run the ball, which I don't believe they'll be able to. Yeah, I don't love their run game. I don't. And I think that's a good thing for the Saints. If you could stop that early, Dallas becomes one-dimensional. Awesome. And then that's why I say Chase Young will be the X factor, because if Chase can go out there and make a play, even Carl Granderson, can he go out there and make a play? That's what you're going to need. Especially with no Lattimore, you're going to need the defensive line to go out there and make a play. Patrick says, you see the Saints schedule, I would throw the season and get high draft picks. We do not throw the season. I think that's kind of crazy. I think that's wild to say throw the season. They're 1-0. They're in a winnable division. And let's get through the first month of the season, and then we could talk about throwing the season. Even then, I would never say throw the season, because that sounds crazy to me. So I'm on the do not throw the season aspect of this. Lone Wolf Elijah says, if Clint can call the plays like he did against the Panthers, we should be okay in Dallas, right? Yeah, absolutely. Again, that's why the Panthers win for me. It's so easy for someone to go, hey, well, it was against Carolina, they stink. The way I looked at it was, if you watch that game, Go back and watch them play Carolina last year. They struggled against Carolina. They struggled at home against the Panthers with Pete Carmichael running the show. And we were like, oh my God, fire everyone. I'll pull up my old podcast. I'll pull up old tweets. We all wanted everyone gone after that game because it looked so miserable. And then the way Kubiak orchestrated that offense last Sunday, granted, inferior opponent, in my opinion, the team they'll be picking number 1 in the draft next year, but you still got to go out there and produce. And they did just that. So kudos to them. Michael says, can we win if we make Dallas one-dimensional? First off, Michael, thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Can they win if they make Dallas one-dimensional? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you force Dallas to just be a passing team, I think you're going to be in great shape. Now, it's all circumstantial. If you force them to just be a passing team, but you can't slow down CeeDee Lamb, then crap. But you got to force them to be one-dimensional, no doubt about it. And I think you can do that. I really think you can do that because Dallas is not a team loaded with backfield talent. They're not. It's Zeke, it's Rico Dowdle, CeeDee Lamb, and a couple end arounds if they try to get the run game a little bit of a spark. There is not a lot of life there in the run game. So I do think you make them one-dimensional. If you're going to do that, though, you got to slow down CD. You got to. Especially if no Ferguson's in the game. That's one less matchup to worry about. Got to slow down CD. And if Brandon Cooks, and I know this would suck for us Saints fans, but if Brandon Cooks goes out there and has 100 yards and that's who you lose to, you got to just accept your loss. So I do agree. If you make Dallas one-dimensional, you're in a great spot, no doubt. Dickie Roberts says, I like what Kay Adams said about the Saints. What did she say about the Saints? I know she spoke about them earlier this week. I'm assuming she was saying they're better than people give them credit for. So if please let me, if you know what she said, please let me know. I am curious about it. I'd imagine that it had to be her complimenting them and maybe saying we're underreacting. I think that's what I saw earlier today. So maybe that's what it was. Lone Wolf Elijah says, I feel like our linebackers will be tested in this one. Do you think so? I don't know. I mean, I would have, if Ferguson was playing, I think it's a great test because I think Ferguson's a very good tight end. I think he's one of the more underrated players at his position. He's probably out. Doesn't mean that this test is easy. I think Dallas's backs, although they're not explosive in my opinion, I do think that they are physical. So maybe, you challenge your linebacking core in that regard. But I don't think that this is the most, challenging thing for them. I think next week is probably more challenging. Philly, Saquon, Dallas Goedert. That might be a little bit more of a challenge for the linebackers. Jalen Hurts, obviously, and how you spy on him. So I think that, to me, is more of a challenge than, against Dallas. Again, that's just my opinion. That's how I feel about it. Calvin says we must win this game. Do I think it's must win? No. Would I love for the Saints to win this game? Yes, sir. Absolutely. So if you guys have any more comments, you guys can get them in. But before I do that, I want to get a quick word from one of our sponsors, DraftKings Sportsbook.
TD, Tutty, taking it to the house, whatever you call a touchdown. They matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? To do so, you have to score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code BOOT. That's code BOOT, BOOT, for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
Once again, thank you to DraftKings Sportsbook for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. Got another comment here, says, talked about a lot, Kay Adams talked about a lot about giving praise to Clint Kubiak and saying we're underreacting, not overreacting, complimenting us. Yeah, that sounds about right. K's been a big Saints fan the last couple of years. And I do think the easy thing to do is that game finishes as against Carolina. I think that's an easy thing to do. To go back, rewatch the game, see how they looked offensively, the running lanes that they created, being on schedule, different Saints team. Lone Wolf Elijah says, do you think we should run the ball more this game or keep the passing game going and surprise Dallas with the run game instead? I think ideally you want a similar game script to what you had last week. Now, I do think that for the Saints, you got to run the football. I feel like Dallas is going to want to pin their ears back and get after Carr, especially with the Saints having young tackles. But we'll see. I do think it's paramount to run the football a little bit more than usual and be physical and get Taysom and Alvin going and even Jamal. So I think run game is going to be paramount here. Patrick says, do you think Carr's good? Be truthful. Do you mean Carr, like Derek Carr? Because if that's the case, you're missing an R. If you mean Carolina, then that's different. But if you're saying Carr, I think Derek Carr is who he's always been. He's been a solid quarterback in the NFL who isn't great enough to be a Super Bowl winner or great enough to lift up the pieces around him. But if the complementary pieces are good around him and he gets to be a supporting player instead of the main attraction, he's good enough to win games with. And that's what we see at times with the Saints. And when we see him falter, it's because he's asked to do more and he's not the quarterback that does more. So that's the way I view Derek Carr. It's the same way I view guys like Kirk Cousins. It's the same way I view guys like Jared Goff. I think that they are good quarterbacks, but they are not game-changing quarterbacks. And in the NFL, where there's not enough good quarterbacks to go around, guys like that will always have jobs, understandably so, but they don't elevate the franchise. So for me, that's the way I view it. Now, if people are going to be mad about Derek Carr and mad about his contract, whatever, that's up to you. $40 million for Derek Carr might sound like a ton in today's NFL. Sadly, it's not that much money compared to what other quarterbacks are making. For example, Tua makes 52, 53, and I'm sorry, I don't think the gap is big between those two. Frankly, I think they're the same fucking quarterback. One throws right-handed, one throws left-handed. So for me, that's the way I look at Derek. I don't think he's a game changer. I also think the Saints can do worse right now, and you hope to draft that guy who eventually replaces him. But for now, you roll with what you got. Jack says, call me crazy, but Chase Young is the X factor for the Saints. He gets going and can get to Dak. That changes the game. I agree, Jack. I really, really agree, Jack. I think that's absolutely right. Louisiana says, you think Olave will feast this game? I hope so. Carolina, if you guys rewatch the game, go from the All-22 film, they really, really put a big emphasis on slowing down Olave. And that's why guys like Shaheed got to really do their thing. That's why guys like Foster Moreau, guys like Jawan, they got to play a big role in the passing game. So Dallas has the cornerbacks to slow down Olave, but I think Olave is due for a big game, and maybe this is the one. Who do you think is going to get more catches this week, Rashid or Olave? More catches? I'm actually going to go Olave this week. I think Olave will bounce back. More yards? Who knows? Because Rashid Shaheed can have one play that's like 60, 70 yards, and all of a sudden that swings in his favor. So more catches? I'll go Olave. So before I wrap it up, just want to get into a little bit of our closing argument here presented by Scott Vicknair. And this is what I'll say about this game before we say goodnight here on the Straight Up Saints podcast. Dallas is, again, like I said, you are up a weight class now. You're facing a 12-5 team, a team that has made the playoffs consistently with Mike McCarthy, and 12-5 obviously dating to last season. Talented team, obviously with Dak and CD, the challenge you're going to have on the defense to stop them. And on the Saints offense, what you're going to be going up against. Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Trayvon Diggs. There's going to be talent on that end. I think for the Saints, running the football is going to be paramount. Taking pressure off Derek Carr, that's going to be huge. Being able to do that, if you can, all of a sudden, we're talking about maybe a 50-50 game if you can run the football with high success like you did last week. Not expecting 180 yards on the ground, but can you get 125? Can you get 130? Things look good in your favor. So we're going to see. It's going to be a physical game, though. I really do believe that. But I'll probably lean Dallas slightly for this week. Dallas by a field goal. But I think this is going to be a really, really fun game. And if New Orleans goes out there and upsets Dallas, we might have to talk about whether or not this could be the surprise team of the NFC this year. I think the Saints showed me enough schematically for me to be in on this season because the division is going to be bad again, in my opinion. I don't think this division is going to be good. I think it's going to be Saints, and I think it's going to be Bucks. That's what I expect. Whoever wins that battle, time will tell. But you go and beat Dallas, you look at this season a little bit differently. And you start to kind of turn some heads in a good way. So we'll see if the Saints can do that, but I'm so excited for this matchup, and I can't wait to see what happens. Thanks, guys, for tuning in, for leaving your comments, your thoughts. I really appreciate that as always, but we'll see. We're going to have our halftime show and post-game live stream this Sunday. It's going to be fun. Hopefully, it's one of those victory ones for us yet again. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.